We saw some research about a new antiseptic that was being used in Europe, and my dad decided to take the risk and come in, bring it to the United States and get FDA approval of it for a preoperative skin prep. The interesting part of it was that there had never been a preoperative skin prep approval from the FDA before, so they didn't even know what kind of studies they were going to require of us. We had to figure it out as we went. And we would submit studies to them, and they'd be like, well, this isn't what we're actually looking for. We want this instead. And we'd go back to the drawing board. It took us 9 years to get this product approved as a topical skin prep, which was a blessing and a curse.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by ExecHQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Bill Brandmeyer. Bill is the founding executive director and CEO of ShareWaves, a 501c3 public charity. He is also the producer and the host of Movement is the Medicine podcast. ShareWaves harnesses the transformative power of sports to build better humans. The organization's mission is to ensure that every child has equitable access to physical activity and high-quality sports engagement. Throughout his career, Bill has partnered with various organizations, from ambitious startups to Fortune 500 companies, collaborating with them to achieve their aspirational goals. You can learn more about Bill at sharewavesfoundation.org. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Bill.
Bill, welcome to the Corporate Couch today.
Hey, I'm excited to be here. What a great opportunity. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, yeah, this is going to be fun. I mean, you reached out to me just kind of a blind, I don't even think it was a personalized LinkedIn invitation. I knew of you. I think I was trying to get a job with you when you were at Anturia, and you never hired me. So even though I
don't know if it was me.
I think it was
one of
you.
Many, so.
No, I don't know. It was somebody there. Anyhow,
I know that I'm doing a lot of prospecting. I'm reaching out to people that I think are kind of playing a role in developing a better Kansas City, and you're one of those people. So I'm sure I was attracted to your message and you as a person. I'm sure I listened to one of your podcasts, what I recall, and I was like, I need to meet that guy. So
yeah, no, it was very nice, and we had a really nice conversation back in April when we met face to face. And look, you have such an interesting background. I've interviewed over 100 people now. What I know is there's not many careers and professional journeys that are straight lines.
No.
And yours is obviously not that way. Neither is mine. But yeah, very excited to talk to you. Let's start a little bit back in, let's start with, even though the people that know you fairly well, Bill, what one thing would surprise them about you?
I always start with, I'm one of 8 kids. I don't think that surprises anybody anymore, but we are a big family from Kansas City, and we love Kansas City. And a lot of the things that I believe in came from my upbringing in a family that was quite large, and 2 parents that probably had no business having 8 kids. So I always say that chaos is my mecca. I thrive in chaos. I'm good under pressure. One of the things I love about event planning is I love the energy of the night of the event and everything that's happening and making it all work. Yeah, that's just part of my life. The other thing I would say is, Yeah, I don't like buffets. I like my own plate, and that may be because I'm one of 8 kids, and
Yeah.
my whole life felt like a buffet. But um, yeah, people probably don't know that about me, but I'd rather have my own plate. I like to
That's
order off
funny.
off the menu and have my own food.
That's so unlike me, Bill, where I was banned from a lot of buffets in Kansas City because I ate so much when I was in my 20s. Like I was
Hey,
banned a lot,
it's economical for sure, but
especially Shoney's on 87th and I-35 at about 2 a.m. after the bars.
there you go.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
there.
after confettis, right? You went for confettis.
Confettis. Wow. That's old school. Just an aside, I did drive from Kansas City, Missouri, Confettis to Blue Springs because that was the closest White Castle, and it was about 1 to 2 a.m. So there you go.
Need the slider. All right.
And if you didn't do double digits, you couldn't even tell people you went to White Castle.
No.
Oh, you only had 6? What happened? Were you sick?
That's not even wasted trip. All right.
What number sibling were you?
So, I'm the youngest of the first 5 and the oldest of the last 4.
Okay.
And I always say it that way because in reality, my mom was 26 years old and had 5 kids under the age of 6. And I
Holy
was the
cow.
youngest. Yeah, yeah. And so I was the baby for the first, 3 years of my life. And then she had my brother John, and then 3 years later had my sister Keisha, and then 3.5 years later had my brother Matt. And I was kind of the oldest of the last group. So I definitely had the youngest child there for a second. I had the middle child there for most of my life, and I also experienced what it was like to be an older brother
Wow.
to my younger siblings. So
Yeah, very nice. So you grew up in Kansas City. What was fun for you growing up? What you love doing?
we're Marion kids. My dad worked for Marion Laboratories, and Ewing Kauffman was his mentor. So we were passionate about the Royals all through the 70s, and it was a big part of our lives. We had tickets to every game, and we had to divide and conquer, get to the games. But I loved baseball. I've always loved sports. I was one of those kids that would get up early in the morning. I wanted to be the first person out to get the Kansas City Star and read the sports page and follow George Brett religiously. I knew numbers and stats and just really involved in understanding that sports had this power to unite us. And that's been a part of my life since I was a kid. And, other than that, we every meal was a banquet. Every meal was a big gathering. My mom cooked big meals and we ate together. We went to church together. When in my early teens, my dad decided to teach church at home. We did home church, which was kind of a crazy life for us. But he taught us out of the Bible, and that was an interesting way to kind of learn what was right and what was wrong, and what kind of person you wanted to be, and really instilled on my heart a love for Christ, and that's something I've carried throughout my whole life.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Just as a brief aside, for some reason, I was probably nervous about interviewing you today. I was up at 4 a.m. and I trying to get back to sleep, but I decided to look if Barry Bonds was the home run record holder because I didn't know I couldn't remember if it was banned because it's a steroids thing, but he is, and that got me into looking at the most hits, which it's Pete Rose, Ty Cobb is second. But I was surprised. I'm a Yankee fan, and Royals Yankees in the 70s had a thing going. But Derek Jeter is like 6th or 7th with 3,500 hits. But anyhow, this is not baseball today, people, but we go everywhere.
Hey, the Royals are winning, so it's good. I mean,
yeah, I love it.
Is taking us to the playoffs, hopefully, and we're a baseball town. We're a sports town. Kansas City, you just can't get away from it. So
yeah, 100%. And I mean, when they had the magical 2014 and 15, when they won the World Series, the Royals was phenomenal. That team was just so move the bus, move the line. They were real definition of a team.
Yeah, they really caught lightning in a bottle, and they seemed to just drive harder than everyone else and work harder, and things worked out for them. Even when people left the stadium and they came back and won.
Exactly.
It's
fun. And just as a brief aside, Game 7 of the 1985 World Series, Royals Cardinals, I was in the last row, upper deck behind home plate, literally. Uh, and I actually ran on the field to get, so I was running around with all the
Nice.
crazies. So there you go.
Good memories.
Um, yeah. So did you have any aspirations as a child? When I'm an adult, I'm going to be this. Since you were sports oriented, does that play third base for the Kansas City Royals, or what was it?
I was little and I ran cross country and I did track. I didn't even play football or baseball. I should have played baseball. That would have probably been my sport. It didn't happen for me. But I was always involved in sports. And, up until ninth grade, I was involved in everything. And then in high school, I got into track and I wrestled. I loved pole vaulting. I pole vaulted. So but I always wanted to be an actor, and I sang, and I thought I was going to go down that road. And then in about 21 years old, I went to work for Jerry Brown and national seminars,
Oh,
and which is now Skill Path. I loved trying to figure out the best way to teach people to solidify change in people's lives. From early on, I wanted to be a motivational speaker. I didn't want to be a pastor. I didn't want to. I did grow up in kind of a youth group, young life, FC. I had a lot of leaders in my life that showed me how to be a better person. But I wanted to kind of remove myself from the faith-based ministries and be someone who motivated people for change. And I always thought back then, when I worked for national seminars, that videos were going to change the way we teach people, that we were going to be able to reinforce these full day seminars that people go to, these corporate retreats, with videos that would follow up and teach them how to become better people through the course of system change and redundancy and watching themselves over and over again. What kind of change am I trying to make? And I don't know, that was part of my early life. From 20 to 25, I thought I was going to be a motivational speaker. So it didn't really work. But now I'm on
there's still
podcast.
time, Bill. I mean, there's not.
You never know. I do like to get in front of a crowd every now and then, but
Yeah.
mostly it's to tell people about what I'm doing with ShareWaves. So
Yeah, I had a lot of corporate jobs, and I love the speaking aspect of it. Putting making presentations fun, not just bullets on a damn PowerPoint slide, and use pictures and things like that.
right.
And I went to a local public speaking speaker course. Mike Bailey. I don't know if you know Mike, but he told me, and I thought, I probably would rate myself in the corporate world, seeing, thousands of people present. I was definitely in the upper echelon. I'm not saying I was, Steve Jobs or something like that, but, it is about performance. It is
Right.
part acting. So,
It is. It is. I did Toastmasters, and
oh
it's
yeah.
the same thing. They put you through the series, and the one thing about Toastmasters that is the best thing walking away from them is they teach you how not to have verbal pauses and not to say things in the middle of your sentences that would break up your train of thought, and just to use the gaps of time and relax and not try to say and it. I still kind of do that sometimes when my brain's thinking, but I try to articulate really well and stop, keep remember my Toastmasters background. I think one other thing that I wanted to say about that time period in my life when I thought I was going to be a motivational speaker is I got sober at 21, which is kind of a young age to stop drinking. So I had some issues with drugs and alcohol through my 20s. I didn't go to college consistently. I tried to go to JUCO and I had some classes. I went to KU for a semester. I had a hard time putting myself together. And I think because I came from a kind of a chaotic background, those kinds of self-disciplines that drive you into successful spaces in life, I just kind of had a hard time picking up on that stuff. And I found myself in AA and 12-step groups and using the 12 steps as a way of disciplining my life and staying focused and starting to build something of value and a positive outcome. And so turning kind of into that space where I wanted to help people, one of the key tenets of recovery is to give back. And so I've carried that my whole life. I've been sober for 28 years. I did a little bit more research through my late 20s to see if I was actually really an alcoholic. And by the time I was 30, I discovered that yes, I was, and no, I can't. And so I haven't had a drink for about 29. It'll be 29 years in November.
Congratulations. That's fantastic. You really had, I don't know if it's strategic thinking, brains don't develop till you're 25 years old. And if you're a guy, I think it's later than that. I always say on this podcast, but at 21 to go through kind of a, 12-step program or AA or anything, I mean, that's pretty, you know, I think, you're a little younger than me, but I mean, it was, idolizing, the Mickey Mantles, the Whitey Fords, the Joe Namaths, the George Bretts. I mean,
Right.
drinking was part of sports. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I mean, at 21, what was that like? Is they go
I
through what
didn't
you
drink like
did?
my friends. That was one of the
Yeah,
problems is I drank differently.
yeah,
And the realization was that my life could still be full without it. And I felt like I had an advantage in most situations because I didn't drink. I was a seeker. I was seeking the truth, and the truth, I thought the truth would set me free, kind of thing. So um, it hasn't, like I said, I went back out and did some more research. So I stayed sober for a long period of time, and then I went back out and tried it again and realized I wasn't. And then, even for the 29 years, I've struggled with other life issues besides alcohol. Just remove alcohol from an alcoholic, and that doesn't make him any better. It just makes him not drink alcohol. Like
right.
I still had a lot of soul work to do, a lot of struggles with honesty and with who I was as a person, own insecurities that I carried, stuff that I carried from my childhood. So it's been a lifelong journey for me to get to a point where I feel comfortable in my own skin and I love what I do and I love the people I'm with and I make good choices and I don't act out in ways that, would hurt my life. But I certainly have made mistakes along the way. So it's just, um, it's been my journey. It's been my path. And
So it looked like, yeah, you didn't go to college right away after graduating from Shawnee Mission East High School in Kansas City, a suburb of Overland Park. So what was your kind of journey like after high school? I mean, you said you worked for National Seminars because it looked like you ended up, not ended up, but finally settled in, at least based on your LinkedIn, with your family's company,
right.
Metaflex at the time.
Yeah, I spent my 20s in the Rockies. I always call it my Rocky Mountain High, but
Yeah.
and I came down off my Rocky Mountain High and I went to work. But it's not lost on me, Jeff. I'm incredibly blessed to have a father who's a mega wealth generator. Like my dad is an amazing person and has lived the American dream and worked hard to create something really unique and special that transformed healthcare and saved thousands and thousands of lives. And you probably can't put a number on the number of people that he has impacted because of his company. And we all worked together, through my 30s and into my mid 40s on building that business to revolutionize a pretty simple practice in healthcare that reduced infection rates in hospitals across the country and became so valuable that we had three different Fortune 500 companies sitting at the table bidding on whether they wanted to buy us. And Johnson and Johnson, Cardinal Health, and 3M, all three wanted a piece of what we had, and we ended up selling the business to Cardinal Health in 2008. And we all eight of us participated in the sale of the company. We all participated in working there. It was a really cool environment. People who worked for us loved working for us. We went through a name transformation at the very end so that we could go international and have a little bit different brand appeal. Metaflex didn't quite fit what we were doing, so we switched our name to Inturia. But once we did that, it just we got an FDA approval on this new topical skin prep, and it killed bacteria better than alcohol and iodine, and it was a better way of distributing it onto the skin, and it just changed the game for all of us and gave us all an opportunity to realize our dreams in this world. And so to try to put it all into a little box, that's my career started at 30. I went to work for my dad and my family, and I put my nose down. I married my wife, who I've been married to for 25 years. We've had 3 kids. We were successful somewhat because we all worked really hard together to build something, and then it sold, and when it sold, it changed the game for all of us.
In a second, maybe go through a little bit of the history, but because not every, we have non-Kansas City listeners, but Marion Labs was Ewing Kaufman's, baby, and he was the owner of the Royals from the beginning, I believe. But
Yeah.
he was such a revered person and a leader, not only in the community, but he, like you said, like people love the people that came from Marion Labs. One, he made a lot of people rich.
Yeah.
And, two, people loved working there. And it sounds like uh, I think Joe's your dad's name. He took that, and based on
Yeah.
my research, he bought some product lines from Marion and started his own company, which I guess started as Metaflex. But maybe talk a little bit, because I know it exited when you just said was in 2008 dollars. It was 490 million. So I did the math, not myself. I used the Google, and that's $715 million exit today. So that's obviously what in Kansas City history. Both your dad and Marion Kaufman are legends. But anything you want to fill in there?
It was, a typical story of having something and working really hard to make it successful. We built a small kit packing company, sterilization of IV start kits and central line dressing change kits, and we had this antiseptic, iodine and alcohol, that we put inside those kits, and it was a 25, $30 million company, and it was always going to be that. It wasn't going to be anything. We saw some research about a new antiseptic that was being used in Europe, and my dad decided to take the risk and come in, bring it to the United States and get FDA approval of it for a preoperative skin prep. And then the interesting part of it was that there had never been a preoperative skin prep approval from the FDA before, so they didn't even know what kind of studies they were going to require of us. We had to figure it out as we went, and we would submit studies to them, and they'd be like, "Well, this isn't what we're actually looking for. We want, we want this instead," and we'd go back to the drawing board. It took us 9 years to get this product approved as a topical skin prep, which was a blessing and a curse. It strapped us. We ended up selling the kit line. We reduced our income to about $11 million when we first finally got approval. We launched the product thinking that everyone was going to buy our kits and trays. We went out to market to try to sell all the hospitals our kits and trays with our new solution inside those kits and trays. And within 9 months, we realized hospitals did not want to switch their protocols into a new kit and tray. They wanted their own kits and trays, and they wanted our solution inside their kits and trays. So they wanted us to work with their vendors to try to create their product the way they wanted it. And so we opened it up to OEM, and we started selling our products through manufacturers and distributors, which turned our little 25 to 30 man and woman sales force into 1,400 sales force. It was instantly overnight. We had all these people that had access to this new product, and they were putting it inside their kits and trays. And then we went into surgery. And when we got to surgery, we realized it was something that, based on the number of sales force we had and the opportunities that were out there, that in order to get this product to market and get it into the hands of the clinicians that were actually treating patients and using its effectiveness to reduce infections, we needed a large sales force company like Cardinal Health to mobilize it and get it out there. And so my parents were like, we're better off selling it to a group of people that can actually just get it distributed throughout the country so that more people lives are saved. And so that's when we sold the business. I was the marketing guy. I created the launch plan. I created the sales plan. I created the full hospital implementation plan. And I did that from my director of marketing position. I moved into new product development and got to learn how new products get developed in healthcare and how science department, how research and development works. I went through the phase gate process and redesigned our whole phase gate process so that I could understand how you go from concept to commercialization and the different stages. And I got to learn everything I know about the world, about business in this world through working for my dad. And it was it was an incredible experience, and it taught me a lot. And I did it with my brothers and sisters, which is really cool. And when it was all over, Cardinal said, "Thanks. We'll see you later." They didn't want to have anything to do with the family. And
Yeah, because most times there's a little bit of a earn out period and all that, but you guys just exited. It looked like.
yeah, we did, and they took it and they ran with it. It's now a $2 billion product for
Wow.
Becton Dickinson. It's exploded, and that everyone benefited. One of those win all the way around. We got to take all our eggs out of the one basket and spread it around. We have great relationships with companies that we've invested in here in Kansas City. My parents have been able to be incredibly philanthropic with the proceeds of selling the business, so that we've enriched Kansas City with our philanthropic investment. And then each of the kids have been able to kind of pursue their own dreams, so to speak. And so, as you kind of go through the family, you can really tell the health of a family by the grandkids, the third generation and the fourth generation. How are they doing? That's where you really tell the tale and take the temperature of how well a family is put together. And I have to say, I'm quite proud of my nieces and nephews and the great grandkids in Kansas City. Because if you meet a Brandmeyer, or you meet someone who's part of the Brandmeyer family, you've met a really good person.
It sounds like it was a good experience, but I don't know if I only have one brother, but working with family sometimes could be tough, let alone at if you own a restaurant, but you're building a company.
It was miserable, Jeff. It was hard. We had therapy. We had family counsel. We had
Any fights?
Yes, of course, yes. And even lawsuits. I mean, it was not, it's just like every business, we struggled with it all. And I remember the first time I presented this whole idea of full hospital implementation and the plan, and my brother looked at me like, "You're absolutely crazy. What do you think the sales force is going to do with this?" And I was just like, "Oh no." I started crying. Like,
oh, jeez.
It was all my best work, and then eventually it turned into the thing that actually, launched our company, because we started calling on the C-suites, and we implemented it from the C-suites into the whole hospital. So we got into all the different departments, and it was the kind of the key that unlocked the door. But when the sales force first heard it, they were like, "We're not going to the C-suites. They don't want to see us. We're going to infection control. That's our nurses. We know that." So anyway, yeah, of course, we had our time. And I always say that the therapy that I got at work was probably more important than some of the stuff I got in my AA meetings. So, personally, I was diagnosed with ADD, adult attention deficit disorder, through the process. And that led to a whole nother personal journey that I've had with my ADD. So there's no escaping this world and the realities of it and the hardships. And you can't run from it. You got to go through it. That's for sure. And we've been through it in our family. We've come out on the other side. We have a tendency to, when we get together, there's a ton of love and a ton of respect for one another. And I would say now there's none of that strife that existed when we were all trying to, do our thing back in the day. So.
Right. So what was it like, Bill, after, you spend, 13, 14, 15 years, the family business, you exit immediately, basically. I don't know if it was a day after the sale or, but fairly quickly. What was that like? Was it a big letdown, or was it like, what do I do now? What was that like for you?
It definitely was. It happened in 2008 before the crash. So we were in cash when everything went to shit in the economy, which was actually a really big blessing. It was almost like a double whammy, where we were sitting in cash while everything was tanking. And so by the time we were able to mobilize and get busy, we had this excellent, entry point, which, so it gave us kind of perspective that, yeah, we're doing the right thing here. But um, I think it left us all a little disconnected. We didn't know how we were going to, I mean, every single meal, every single celebration, we talked business. It was I mean, the main subjects were always talking about how we were going to build this business together. So that went away, and we each kind of went in our own path. And there's parts of me that wished we would have done a better job of creating a family office and did a family foundation, and did a lot of families, the Hall families and some of the other big Kansas City families have done some really great work as they've figured out how to unify their resources together for good. But my parents have always kind of decided that they wanted their kids to figure it out on their own, and so they let us go to do our thing. And I've made some big mistakes. I wish I knew then what I know now for sure, coming out of that. But the one thing I would give advice to anyone who's in that kind of situation where this windfall of blessings, of monetary blessings come their way, first of all, just be super patient. I wish I would have been more patient. I was very anxious to find my footing and make a name for myself. So I invested in the things that I knew about, which were restaurants and music. I loved both, and I wanted to be involved in both. And so I failed at both, because I hadn't put in that time and energy and money and hours that it takes to be successful at those things. So that's the journey that I took afterwards. My other brothers and sisters have had different journeys, and there are things that we still do together. We co-invest in a lot of different opportunities. We're all co-invested with a great company in Kansas City called North Point Development, and that's been one of the best investments we've made as a family. There are times when we sit down together and decide to do different things together, and then we've done a lot of things separately. And after I get done with this podcast, I'm going into the family office this afternoon with my wife, and we're going to listen to a cybersecurity expert teach us about security and AI and cyber stuff, and so we still do a lot of those things as a family. And then, we celebrate life together still, and we're all still very close to one another. And next year, the Brandmeyer third generation has 5 weddings. So
Wow.
we're gonna be together a lot next year, and we'll be all over the map. So excited about that. And it's a lot better to celebrate life than celebrate death, but also funerals bring us together too. And at this point, my parents are both healthy, and they're fighting the fight, and they're vegan, so they're really cool people, and they eat right, and they're taking care of their bodies. And my mom's the most energetic, amazing 85-year-old you could possibly ever run into. And if you get a chance to know her, she's amazing.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Exec HQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. If you're having challenges taking your business to the next level, if you want to augment your leadership team, or prepare your company for increased growth, profitability, and an eventual successful exit, we have seasoned executives from every C-suite position ensuring a perfect fit for your needs and the dynamics of your industry. You will work with senior leaders who like to roll up their sleeves while checking their egos at the door. They can help your business in specific services such as strategic planning, executive leadership coaching, financial management, corporate governance, marketing, sales management, and many other advisory solutions vital to your business success. That's exechq.com. To learn more, go to exechq.com or email Jeff Palacio at jeff.palacio@exechq.com.
I think about, my career journey. I mean, there's really no mistakes, right? No failure. I mean, I think you always put, God puts you where you should be, and there's the learning from that. That is the gift, right? I mean, you're a better person probably because, I think we talked about you did that concert at when it was Livestrong Stadium, the country. I went
Yeah, no,
there.
I
It
didn't
was
do that one, but I did one at the Speedway
oh the
called,
Speedway. Okay, yeah,
yeah, Ken Roxas, and that
yeah.
was
So I mean, it's the part of the journey, right? I mean,
it is, and I'll there's a part of the big book. It's called the Promises. It says we will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. I don't regret the past. There are things that I did, some actions I took, some people I hurt that I definitely regret, and that I've worked to make amends to or living amends. But in terms of the totality of my life and where God has me today, and I am who I'm supposed to be because of the journey I've been on. And I have been uniquely equipped to do what I'm doing right now. And that's what has me most excited about getting up every day is I feel like God has me right where he wants me.
yeah, and it's interesting you bring up North Point. I didn't realize your family was an investor there, but I've interviewed a former employee there and a current, and I am just so impressed with the culture. I mean, I'm just,
Yeah.
just from an hour plus, 2 hour plus interviews,
No,
one
Nathaniel
is,
Hagedorn is the real deal. And
yeah.
he's one of the greatest men I've ever known. So that's for sure. He lives it, he breathes it, he walks it, he talks it, and his
Yeah.
company represents it for sure.
Yeah, no, that's so good. That's so good. So I mean, let's talk about kind of where you're at now. I mean, it looks like you're part of Union Broadcasting, but I think
Yeah.
the big thing is where you're giving back and playing that social entrepreneur
Yeah. So
role.
along with the mistakes I made investing in restaurants and trying to do this music festival, I also wanted to give back. And so shortly after we sold the business, I started a nonprofit called Casey Creative. And it was a 501c3 that helped 501c3s with their creative services. It was a creative service provider that worked to create websites, create strategy sessions with nonprofits, help nonprofits with their branding, brand identity. Mostly we did the fund and need videos, the ask videos that these organizations use during their galas or their events that they do. And we got pretty good at it. We won some Philly Awards, which is the Nonprofit Connect Award that they give out every year. We got some recognition, but we couldn't get enough support. The best thing we did was, you mentioned the KC Cares radio show. For 4 years, I went on the air once a week and I interviewed 3 different people. It was before podcasting was cool. And we interviewed executive directors, and that's how I met Justin Matthews, the person you mentioned that you talked to earlier today. And it's how I got to know a lot of the executive directors throughout Kansas City in the nonprofit world. I learned a lot. I talked to philanthropists about why they give back and what they give to. I talked to David Rentz, who's one of the Midwest Centers of Nonprofit Leadership stalwarts that has kind of wrote the book on Kansas City philanthropy. At the time, we figured there's 7,000 nonprofits in our city. And if we were a 501c3, we would understand the plight of 501c3s. One of the keys to these nonprofit organizations that we've identified early on is that they live in a culture of poverty and they think that they can't afford to do the things they have to do in order to be successful. And so they don't do them, and so they're not successful. It's just kind of like this thing. And in this culture of poverty is pervasive in any nonprofit that is just starting, getting going. And it's so funny because I started this nonprofit that experienced the same thing, culture of poverty, couldn't figure it out. And then I moved into this other space where I tried to create a new nonprofit with the help of 810 WHB. And I suffer from this. I'm still coming out of it, but I suffer from the same thing where I can't afford to do the things that I know I need to do in order to be successful, to become a world-class organization like the for-profits that I've worked for and that I've got, worked with, and the ones that I've gotten to know. And so that's kind of been my journey from the time we sold the business. Was I invested my time and talent and treasure in different nonprofit entities. I tried to help, kind of with the ripple effect where I give my talent forward and pay it forward. And I've realized that it's really good for me. It may be the space I belong in because I'm good at it. And I love what's happening because of using my talent that way. And ShareWaves is just kind of the culmination of that. I feel like what I'm doing with ShareWaves is I'm using what God has gifted me with, my ability to connect, my ability to strategize, my ability to understand what needs to happen in order to build something successfully. I put the time and energy into building it, and I feel like, at least today, that I'm reaping some of those rewards. Some good things have happened even this week that I'm excited about.
I had a brief stint at Greater Kansas City United Way. So that was my first venture into not-for-profit world. I sat on a board for about 18 months on a startup not-for-profit. I have friends that are, in this, have executive roles at not-for-profit. And I think part of the challenge is, I remember before I made the decision to go to United Way, a friend of mine who did work at one of the largest not-for-profits in Kansas City told me, like, you're not going to be, let's use the baseball analogy. Like, if you work for, Anturia or Cardinal Health or BD or Sprint, T-Mobile, Garmin, you're kind of in the major leagues, right?
Right.
And but when you go to a not-for-profit, it's a little different. The talent is different. I mean, you're still leading them, and you're still doing marketing, you're still doing fundraising, which is we'll call it sales, right? Business development, but it's just a different level of talent. So it's and as a catch-22, you can't get the money to afford the people, and it's such a
it's interesting. It goes back to my new product development days. When you look at the phase gate process, one of the things that one of my mentors always said to me was, in order for a product to get from concept to commercialization, you need one person with a lot of energy and a lot of passion to drive it. Because at every stage of the game, they're trying to kill it. Because the further down the phase gate process you go, the more money you spend. And by the time you get to clinical studies or prototypes or by the time you get to that pre-commercialization phase, you spend a great deal of resources without any compensation.
right.
And you're just hoping that your commercialization forecasts and the hope is that this is going to work, that you are going to launch a product that is successful. So it's very similar in the nonprofit world. If you don't have the one person that's driving it with the passion and the understanding and the knowledge, and it's hard to surround them with enough talent that actually gets it to pay off.
Right.
And when you're battling these organizations that have been there for a long time and have already made it their way through into the psyche of the philanthropic dollar, like Boys and Girls Club, Operation Breakthrough, Big Brothers and Big Sisters, Children's Mercy Hospital, University of Kansas Health Center, and then the national ones, American Heart Association, and all of these other, the Kansas City Zoo, and all of these organizations that take up the air and the money. Because in the nonprofit world, you have about 10% of the nonprofits that take up 80 to 85% of all the money. I mean, the 80-20 rule works in nonprofits. It just works where the top 10% of the nonprofits get 80 to 90% of the money. And so as a small nonprofit, if you have one person that gets it and is pushing, then you can make it through. And there has been some success stories. There's a nonprofit in Overland Park that's led by Delise Hofen called Braden's Hope. And, they're a perfect example of a nonprofit that started with the passion of a woman who had a son that had cancer, and she saw that there wasn't enough resources being driven to cancer research for kids. And she's made it her mission, her life mission, to change that. And she's raised millions and millions of dollars. I think of Dan Rooney with Folds of Honor, same kind of thing. He was just struck by this non-patriotic energy that he felt on an airplane. And as he came off the airplane, he decided he was going to commit his life to creating opportunities for fallen soldiers' families to go to school. And now the Folds of Honor is everywhere, So, but it takes that energy of that one person that, just sticks to it and drives it through. And that's what makes the nonprofit world a little different. Entrepreneurship is similar to that, but it also includes bringing people along with you pretty quickly to energize the thought processes of a new business and the ideas of what a new business is going to do to make money, because you need those rounds of capital to fund it through, but nonprofits don't get those rounds of capital.
Right. They're not talking to VCs and PE
No, no.
firms.
Yeah.
One more question before we talk about ShareWaves. So you've had this great, like, let's say, marketing career. I mean, in leadership. Where did that passion in marketing come from? Because I saw in your school days you were a psychology major. So
Yeah.
and
No,
I'm
I think
not saying marketing is a lot of psychology for sure.
well, one thing about having a lot of grandkids and a lot of great grandkids and brothers and sisters, you can kind of see that it's part of our DNA. I mean, it's just about who Brandmeyers are. We kind of think this way. We love people. We're connectors. We also are very strategic in the way we think. You know, you can see like different threads of it go through our family, but I think that's part of me. I feel like is kind of a natural. I just feel naturally drawn towards the fundamentals of marketing, you know, product placement, price, all of that stuff. It just gets right where I like to be. I like to think strategically. I think very logically and very traditionally, where I think vision, mission, what are you trying to get accomplished? You know, SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, critical success factors. What are the most important things you do today to make yourself successful? And then clear, smart objectives, you know, and make sure that they're strategic, make sure they're measurable, make sure that they're, you know, timed, make sure that they're reachable. All of the things that go into making up a traditional, true blue marketing. That's how I'm wired. And you know, then you get down to strategies and tactics, and it may be that there's like this competitive natural piece to it. It's probably the sports thing that kind of drew me into strategies and tactics, but I don't like to get to tactics until I've really built a really high end infrastructure of what is it you're trying to get accomplished. Why are you doing what you're doing? What gets you out of bed? What's your purpose? What's happening? And then objectives, smart objectives, you know who and what you want to be when you grow up and know how you're going to get there. So Lao Tzu is the one that said it best, you know, it's all about the plan.
So yeah, so let's talk about ShareWaves. It looked like you founded it in late 2018. Talk about what it stands for. Why did you start it, and you know, where you're at today?
I was involved in purpose-driven transformation. I was working with a local company here called Will and Grail. They used to be an advertising agency that was Marco Rennick and his partner, Salvo Rennick, Dan Salva and Marco Rennick. And they moved to this transformation kind of platform. And I went to work for them for 2 years, just kind of learning about what purpose-driven transformation was all about. And Mark was just a mentor. He just taught me so much, and he's just a wonderful person and smart guy. And I was trying to figure out how purpose-driven transformation might work, and I was looking for something to do. And I had this relationship with Union Broadcasting and Chad Boger and 810 WHB, and I asked Chad if I could maybe present an idea to him that would be transformational for his organization. And the idea was to create a purpose within the company based on their, you know, the assets that they had available to them and what they could do, and something that was single cause and that could drive a unity of thought and of change through their organization. And he said, yeah, knock yourself out. What do you want to do? And I was like, I want to create a foundation that is built on, you know, powered by your radio station. I knew enough about it because that's where I did my radio show. So I understood that there was this enormous, you know, place in the community's heart for 810 WHB and sports talk radio. And, you know, when you ask me the question, what do people not know about you? One other thing people don't know about me is I've listened to talk radio since I was a little kid. Maurice Saper, who was the psychologist on the air, I used to go to bed to him every night. I used to listen to the Royals games all the time. I listened to sports talk when I was growing up. I've always been about that. So I it was kind of a marriage made in heaven type of deal. And I said to Chad, I said, what cause do you want? What should be our cause here at 810 WHB, Union Broadcasting? He goes, why don't you tell us? And I was like, well, if I'm going to tell you, it's going to be youth sports, because I think there's a lot we can do to help kids, and why not invest in the next generation of listeners, by branding ourselves to the younger kids who don't listen to the radio. I said, it just made sense. And he said, yeah, let's do that. So I put together a platform, and one night I was going to bed and I just thought, airwaves, ShareWaves, share the airwaves. They're letting me share the airwaves with with every, like, how do we share the airwaves? So that's where ShareWaves came from. It doesn't really connect to youth sports in any way, but it does have this affiliation to the radio station. So I that's kind of how that happened. And we've founded this whole idea on advancing opportunities for kids to play sports. And what we've realized is that there's some problems in youth sports today, and there's a lot of work to be done in helping kids transform their lives with the power of sports. There's a disparity gap that actually exists between kids who have resources and kids who don't. And we're working to try to close the disparity gap. But more than anything else, we're trying to harness the power of sports to transform kids' lives and make them better people. And so that's kind of where this building better humans with the harnessing the transformative power of sports comes from. There are opportunities for us to really save our kids that are desperate for some sort of connection to this world, some way of tethering them to something more important than themselves. We've lost our kids in a lot of areas. COVID made it worse. And there's so much opportunity for us to do good in the kids' lives if we can get them into a sports environment where they're getting holistic development, in impact in education, and helping them with their mental health and their physical health and their spiritual health. So that's what ShareWaves is.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this when I met you at your office. I love coaching youth sports. So mainly my son, my daughter was. I think my daughter is one of the examples that you may be mentioning, and she's a well-adjusted adult, a business owner. So, but I remember when she played first and second grade soccer, the coach was so intent on winning and playing the best players on offense. Like, think about when you're first grade. I mean, it's all about speed, right? Like, if you get in soccer, who the fastest person is going to score the most goals for the most part. My daughter always played defense, and it was a six person. They're playing 6 person, but still, like, you're not doing anything on defense most of the time. Right. And so she got bored with it, and she didn't get the experience the fun of scoring and all that. And then my son is 2 years younger, but when he got into like a pre-kindergarten where they would just do 3v3s on short fields, where he would score 20 goals, not him, but the teams would score 20. So he got to participate, and that was my philosophy when I was coaching. And I loved the practices the most, because the practices where all the work gets done and the fun. But I would always have them, from kindergarten soccer, or I did kindergarten basketball. You got to keep the kids active. No, you can't tell them a lot. Right. Like, here, you got 30 seconds, maybe a minute to say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and then do it. I had one assistant coach who would go on and on. I go, you're not a lawyer. Stop talking. We got to get them going, and have them always active in different groups and all that. And so they can get to experience it.
When I first started ShareWaves, I turned my attention towards the Aspen Institute's Project Play. It's been around for 10 years. 6 years ago, they did a state of play for the United States. Now they've done community reports in 14 other cities. Yesterday, they released the Kansas City Physical Activity Report that is specifically for our area. And it really talks about the things that need to happen in order to increase the amount of impact we have on kids' lives with the power of sports. And I invite everybody to check it out. It's available. They can go to my website and get a link to it. It's an amazing opportunity for us to really recognize that we now have a chance to impact kids in a positive way. And so I'm excited about the opportunity. I'm excited about what the Aspen Institute can do. ShareWaves is poised to take advantage of it. And so we are super excited to be a part of that. And it was something I wanted to do 4 years ago. And it's happened. So it's a big deal.
Talk about some of the stats that are out there, Bill, in terms of kind of what happens to youth who don't continue on in sports. And that, I'm not talking about making the high school varsity, basketball team or
No, I
lacrosse.
think the biggest stat is the amount of kids who get 60 minutes of activity a day in Kansas City. 24% of the boys in our city get 60 minutes a day, and it's about 16% for girls. It's not enough physical activity. The kids are not getting recommended amounts of physical activity. They're missing out on a lot of interaction with one another. They're missing out on not being able to be on their phones because they're playing on the fields. We need to get our kids more physically active, especially high school kids. 70% of all kids drop out of sports at age 13. That's basically eighth grade when they decide to stop playing sports. We have a huge gap between kids' experiences. There's a gap between the amount of joy and fun kids have out of sports if they have resources compared to kids who don't have resources. There's a quality gap between the coaches that under-resourced kids have and resource kids. There's this specialization in travel baseball and young ages of trying to do elite stuff and just a lot of problems that I don't know if we're ever going to change those problems. But what I think we can do is come together with a coalition of nonprofits and community leaders to start to talk to some of the key issues of how do we improve the experiences of all children in sports in general, and how do we create more opportunities for high school kids to play throughout their high school career so that they can get more of these life lessons that sports teaches. It's just one of those unique opportunities that we get very few of them anymore. We used to develop our kids in some really specific ways with church and school, and church and school are kind of letting our kids down. And now our kids are untethered and they're addicted to their phones and they're acting out in ways, and there's more depression and there's more anxiety and there's more isolation and loneliness and self-harm and God forbid suicide and violence in the streets and addiction that are happening to our kids, that we need as parents to try to take hold of the reins and figure out how to help these kids out of it.
So outside of the Aspen Kansas City report, what's exciting you right now?
Well, I've got the Blasters coming up. The Blasters is the top golf event that I do every year. It's the Blasters, not the Masters. It's an event like no other. And I have head coach Bill Self come in with his full squad. All of his basketball players have committed to come. And so it's going to be a really great Jayhawk event. But we'll have MU players and I'm good friends with Kareem Rush and Tony Temple, and we'll have a bunch of K-State guys there too. And it's a really great night to come together. One of the cool parts of the Blasters is we bring 300 kids there and we give them golf lessons. So during the day, we'll have a party for kids. 300 kids will come from Boys and Girls Club and Big Bros and Big Sisters and other organizations that we invest in and work with, and they'll get free golf lessons. We're going to have the KU golf teams, the both men and women come and give them golf lessons. And then they'll go home, and at night we'll do the Battle of the Bays, which is a 6-man competition, corporate kind of golf tournament. And 810 will be out there broadcasting, and we'll have Brian Haney there helping us, and a bunch of other fun games and prizes to give away and silent auctions and everything that you do at big events. And so I'm excited about that. And, I'm excited about my podcast. I have a podcast called Movement is the Medicine. Movement is the medicine for us to change our lives and change our kids' lives. And it's really what I do to help tell parents how important it is to get their kids physically active and engaged. And it's something that I'm really proud of. And we've done 16 episodes. My co-host, his name is Dr. Doug Hugendijk. I call him Dr. Doug. He is a PhD physical therapist and biomechanics specialist. He's an international speaker at FIFA conference and isokinetics and all kinds of stuff. And he works with elite athletes. And he is able to get some of the top athletes in the world to come on our show and talk about what it's meant to have sports anchor their lives and make their lives better through the sports that they've played, and what it means to be at the top of their game. But all the episodes, we kind of weave in parental advice on how to help your kid become a better athlete, but also a better person.
Bill, there's two groups I love helping. One is that recent college graduate as they're trying to figure out, what the hell to do in their professional career, get that first job. What advice would you give those recent college graduates?
The world's crazy, um, and it's changing so quickly. The onset of artificial intelligence and the, is you kind of have to be on your toes, trying to figure out what kind of career path you want to take. I am a big believer in leaning into your connections. I think that all of us that have been through it, you and me included, we're willing to help. And so I would encourage all college graduates to not be afraid to ask for help and ask for suggestions and ask for advice. There's, the Ralph Waldo Emerson quote that every man is my master in some way, therefore I shall learn from all, is something that I've carried through my whole life. I've really never had an interaction with someone where I wasn't able to glean something from their life that might help me enrich who I am. And so my advice would be something along those lines, that don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, yeah, everyone you meet, you learn from, right? And that's no matter what they are. The second group is once you become a manager, now you're responsible for a group of people. So you were a sales rep, now you're a sales manager, or you were a marketing coordinator and then a marketing manager. Now you're the director of marketing or whatever the title is. But now you're responsible for a group of people. What advice would you have for them, Bill, as they begin their leadership journey?
I love that question. I'm a big believer in collaborative thought. I think that every person on the team needs to be recognized and honored for the talent they bring, and included into the processes that you're, for the ultimate outcome of being successful. So I would really encourage new managers to invest in understanding the talent that their employees have, that the people underneath them have, and the role that they play as they contribute to the team as a whole. There are no accidents. God has put things together the way He, thinks they need to be, and it's up to us to help figure out how that all fits together so that everybody feels part of something as you build something special. I know in my family that was certainly true. We each one of us had our own sense of where we belonged within the family business and what we brought to the table. And my dad recognized the talent that he had in front of him, and he put us where we belonged. So it worked out well.
Yeah, that's great advice. Bill, I love what you're doing with ShareWaves. You're a great person. I love your transparency, and we had such a great conversation when we first met, and today was just like that. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being on the Corporate Couch today.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on. I'm sure I'm not people aren't going to rush to come hear me talk, but I think everybody has a story to tell, and it's worth having platforms like yours where that if there's just one thing that you walk away from our conversation with that makes you think or makes you feel better or makes you think better or be a better person, then it's worth the listen. So thanks for having me on, and I certainly enjoyed every minute of it. So
Yeah, thanks again.
take care.
What a great conversation with Bill. I think he's so genuine, and it just shows that no matter how much money you have, and obviously he didn't say how much money he had, but in 2024 dollars, their company Enturia sold to Cardinal Health for I think it was like $715 million.
That had to be split by the family, but
Yeah.
how you would split it, that's a substantial amount of
Yeah,
money.
but I mean, he comes out as kind and generous and authentic, and really, everybody on the corporate couch for the most part, I mean, 90+% of the people either have a crazy college journey or squiggly line journey at least, and so is their career, and it just shows you like even with having money, and he didn't get it till I can't remember how old he was when the deal closed, but I'll say probably he was in his late 30s, maybe 40, which is still, you have plenty of career left at that point. He's just so transparent, like his struggles, he was in the AA at 21 years old, like, and then he stopped drinking for about 7-8 years, and he had a relapse. He thought he could start again, just socially, but he found out he couldn't. And now I think it's going to be 29 years next month. We're recording here in October 2024. I think in November it'll be 29 years sober for him. So just an amazing story, and what he's trying to do and give back, and he just has a servant leader, purpose-driven transformation heart. So he's just a great guy, and I really enjoyed talking to him. What did you think about the conversation?
I thought it was absolutely amazing. The whole thing, the whole thing about sudden acquisition of wealth is kind of a personal fantasy of mine. But I've kind of wondered, okay, so what would I do? And it's interesting to study people who have gone through that kind of experience and how they reacted to it and the troubles that they had. It just makes for a very interesting study in human behavior, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm going to go a little bit different path too, where he talked one time that the product that essentially the company had was a topical antiseptic, which you would think is not an extremely complicated product, right? And I don't know all the details about it, but obviously there was something unique about it. When they took that to the FDA, though, to get approval for it, it took 9 years to get approved. And that is just absurd. If you want to know why drugs cost so much money in America, that is a big reason why. It takes 9 years for the FDA to get approval for essentially a topical antiseptic. That's just insane. And I think back on, and you and I have been in business for cumulative many decades. Have you ever worked on a project in business that went along for 9 years?
Right.
Any kind of implementation project or a conversion project or something? No. I've been on some very, very significant, huge implementations of computer systems. And if they last a year, that's a long time. It took 9 years.
I know. Well, when we were at PCS, we built a company in about 15 months and launched a company that was a nationwide.
Launched the company from scratch.
Right.
In a year and a half. And you think what SpaceX is. SpaceX has literally flown into space in the period of a couple of years.
Right.
So, and think of the attrition that happens during 9 years of a project. All the people that have come onto the project and then left the project, and then somebody else comes on to take his place, and there's all sorts of onboarding that you have to do and everything. It's an incredible inefficient process. So I was struck by that, but not particularly surprised, because I've seen other experiences with government bureaucracies that takes that. But that's one of the things that just really struck me about the interview.
Just to piggyback on what you said about getting the wealth. So that was the other really strange thing about the whole process. So, 13 plus years working for the family business, and that's all the family talked about. Everybody was involved, the parents, the brothers and the sisters, I assume.
A dinner table conversation.
Yeah, and so they sell in, I'm not exactly when, it was 2008, I believe, and they literally, the day after the sale, they no longer, they didn't even, none of them were retained, and it was like trying to figure out what to do with his life after that, as well as the family dynamics, which he said, working with families like a shit show, basically.
Oh, yeah.
But the other thing, he was so transparent. He's basically said, I went in things I knew, which was restaurants and music. That's what I knew. But he failed He basically said, I failed because I didn't put the work in. I didn't put the time in. I didn't put the energy in. I didn't put the money in that was needed to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just a great interview. I just thought I so enjoyed talking to him, and I can't wait till I have another conversation with him down the road.
It was great.
Yeah.
Loved it.
What leadership advice do you have for our great listeners based on Bill's journey?
Today we are going to that great therapist named Dave Barry. And Dave Barry one time said this. He said, "My therapist told me that the way to achieve true inner peace is to finish what I start. So far, I finished 2 bags of M&Ms and a chocolate cake. I feel better already."
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.